An abandoned amusement park with mysterious origins that may have paranormal events taking place in it.
What could possibly go wrong?
Crow Country is a cross-up between the gameplay of the original Resident Evil mixed with the models of the PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy VII, and a whole lot of games with influence in between. It comes out today, May 9th, 2024, for the price of $19.99, and can be found in the PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and the PC. For this review, I reviewed the Steam version of the game, beating it twice in about 10 hours of runtime. So, will Crow Country surprise and squawk its way into the survival horror elite? Or will it not be able to pick up its own corpse after being dropped by its own faults? But before I begin, this key was obtained from the developer for the purposes of review. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? Crow Country has you take control of Mara Forrest, an FBI agent searching for the mysterious Edward Crow, who has seemingly gone missing. Your investigation leads you to his desolate amusement park named Crow Country, where you hope to find answers and bring Mr. Crow to whatever your mission with him is. Along the way, you'll run into mysterious creatures and different characters as you unravel a web of events of what truly happened in this park, and what part you may play in it. With the basic story premise out of the way, let's start with the wings that propel this crow through the sky. Its gameplay. Anyone who's played a Resident Evil game, especially the ones on the PS1, will be familiar with Crow Country's formula. You'll explore the environment, finding resources and dealing with puzzles, while dealing with creatures that will try to kill you. In terms of combat, you got what you'd expect to begin with, a pistol, but along the way, you'll find a shotgun, a flamethrower, and a magnum. Your melee options are, well, they don't actually exist for the first run through, which actually does mean that you have to actually shoot the items out of the crates, which is a little bit weird for me at first. To fire at enemies, you just hold the right bumper on an Xbox controller, which will put your character in a stationary position. You can move the gun up and down with the control stick while also moving it left and right as well. Aiming can feel a little wobbly at first, which I think is purposeful, as it forces you to really lock in your target at a distance, assuming you find the pretty early laser sight, which makes it a lot easier, and take your shots with your limited ammo. Enemies don't go down easy. Most of them take a chunk of handgun bullets or a good few shots of your shotgun, so you don't really want to waste them. Granted, aiming for the head is going to save a couple of shots, especially when you can knock the head clean off, but the top-down perspective and aiming can make that challenging, especially with the moving targets in this game. The game's combat is most effective in the first half of the game, as you're getting accustomed to the controls overall. It can lead to some tense situations, especially with limited resources. Although, you could always just go back to your car to get some more handgun ammo if you so desire, which does take a little bit of the pressure off, but you can run into new enemies and respawning ones along the way, so there's a good bit of balance there as well. Ammo is somewhat scarce, but not too scarce, meaning that you don't want to be running at every enemy with guns ablazing, but you can take out big threats as they push you. You will have to use some logic to find some of that ammo though, as some of the presentation and angles can hide them naturally in the environment. That does transition into what I think the thing that holds Crow Country back the most when it comes to the combat, and maybe the game overall: your movement and controls. That's not to say that the controls are bad here in terms of usability and feel. It's actually that you may have too much control over Mara against the enemies. More specifically, I wonder about the design of the base speed of Mara here. Mara is agile enough to deal with, well, most everything in the game. Now, people who played the original Resident Evil may point out that you could run by those enemies too, but these controls aren't fully like the tank controls of a game like Dino Crisis or the original Resident Evil. If you have enough room to work, you can easily make your way through enemies without a care in the world, and not stop 2 or 3 times to adjust your angle. Sure, things can get more complicated as the space to maneuver decreases, and sometimes you are forced to fight in locked rooms or corridors, which is where the game starts to return to those Resident Evil roots most definitely. But that wasn't as often as I would have hoped, and that goes double when you get an upgrade later in the game that makes your run speed even faster. Running by enemies just became too powerful in the big picture, and I know that I may get a little bit of shit for this, but I do wonder if a stamina meter would have been reasonable here, meaning that you had the ability to run, but not perpetually around every enemy. That's why I think the speed of Mara may have been easy to adjust so that she could get away from some enemies, but not necessarily get by them so quickly. I also do wish that there were more big fights in the game to test the combat prowess of yourself. For spoiler reasons, I won't say how many there are, but I found myself wanting a tiny bit more in the 4 to 5 hours I played in my first run. While I do feel like there's a misstep here or two in combat, the game does pick up the ball when it comes to atmosphere, exploration, and puzzle elements of Crow Country. This definitely hit nostalgic feelings about playing the original Resident Evil for the first time, or many of the survival horror games of the PlayStation 1 and 2 generation. It sets the atmosphere early with the unique presentation and angle combination, which at first made me wonder if it would truly get me immersed in the game. I mean, if you look at the camera angles of games like Silent Hill, a good amount of the time, the camera is at a location that's more on par with the sight of the protagonist, which can help with feeling on the same level as them and feeling like you're there. Obviously, with a more overhead camera angle, you could feel a little more like a god directing Mara the way she's going, which you'd think would give the game trouble when it comes to putting you in the moment. But the combination of the presentation, telling you enough to paint the picture, yet leave some details out thanks to the low polygon elements, along with the great sound and music design, will put you in a tense atmosphere from the get-go. There's great locations in the game that truly stand out to me, like the first bathroom encounter with an obviously shaking door, making you wonder what's behind it. Sure, we've seen that before, but it's effective here. But it's the variety in which the game hits you with these different environmental elements that pushes it to the next level. The circular hedge maze is a prime example. Its sharp corners and direction changes makes you wonder if it's hiding something sinister, and the game knows how to pace each room and location well when you first get introduced to it. Lighting in particular stands out because the way that certain rooms are dimming corners or lit up actually puts you on edge too, as you cling to your flashlight hoping you're not missing something in the background. For someone who's a veteran of the survival horror genre, I was impressed how the environment never scared me horribly, but kept me on edge, which is exactly what I would hope the game could do. Yes, the monsters make a huge part in that, but the environments are just as important, and the developers seem to realize this, and well, it shows. The game paints a picture that falls well into the creepy antique shop mixed with a haunted house motif, as you could feel corruption spilling into the child-friendly exhibits, and there's something naturally off about something meant for fun being turned into something sinister. Again, we've seen this in plenty of other horror games, but I will give Crow Country a lot of credit for sticking with more vibe-based horror rather than the more recent trends of focusing on jump scares. It would have been easy, even with the focus on more vibe-based horror, to sneak a bunch in there, but rarely does the game go to that. But when it does, it's rather effective. It helps that the sound design is so pointed at times, especially with some of the more naturally loud sounds in the game. Like, every time the phone in this game rang, I actually jumped a tiny bit mentally. The understanding of where to put that audio level compared to the background music or even zombie/creatures groaning showed some smart and effective sound mixing because it grabbed my attention. It's actually something I really want to focus on here in terms of its implementation, because the sound design is always not perfect, but feels off in purposeful ways. Like the indication of getting an item. Yes, you got an item, that's something positive, and yet it felt mysterious in the way they chose to somehow show it. Well, not show it, but actually play it. The little train cars driving along, making the chugging sounds, despite being accurate, still also feels a little bit uneasy in certain ways. Yes, some of that has to do with the vibes that the game was giving off, but I was surprised how much I, well, got into it. Just take a listen and focus on the sound in particular, not the music, the sound, and hear what I'm talking about. The music, on the other hand, isn't going to take any awards home or get on your playlist, but it's here to enhance the story and the vibes. Certain rooms may have upbeat, yet mysterious tones within it, and when you get into boss fights or combat, you start to feel the action come from the music left and right. Now, this isn't something that you're going to listen to outside the game, but it's also something that I would encourage players not to multitask during this game. Don't play other YouTube videos or music during it. I noticed when I did that, the game wasn't as effective. Mostly for the, well, horror vibes. Just take a listen, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. Those horror vibes are also complemented by the exploration and puzzle gameplay rather nicely. Exploring the world on what to do next is a little messy if you're not paying attention to the text and the clues the game is giving you. This is not a game that will hold your hand directly, which is a direct influence from those old survival horror games that it's based off of. Which I appreciate that there's no direct quest indicator, although you could always ask the fortune machine for a hint to what to do next, which takes its place, although that will hurt your overall grade for that run. But honestly, things aren't too bad in terms of getting lost, thanks to the central hub-like center of the park that gives you access to the different sections of it. And the game does do some smart things when it comes to reminding you of the map of what to do. Anything that has a puzzle that hasn't been solved gets this red circle, which is really valuable and can help jumpstart what you're thinking of going towards. Exploring gives a good selection of both items to find and puzzles to do. In terms of items, there's a good mixture of obvious items in locations right in front of you to a set of items just out of the way, so that you may find them when you come back to an area and are desperate for a healing item. I also noted that places that seem to give items more randomly, or things that gave items more randomly, garbage cans, vending machines, and the like, seem to give you items more often when you truly need them, like bullets if you're out, or med packs if you're really hurting. The game does have some secrets to find too on both the first and second run. I won't say the second one because, it's a sort of a spoiler. That'll keep you looking around every corner. And I did like the emphasis on being observant, like a detective would. Which leads me to the puzzles and tasks of the game. And this is where I think of all things, Crow Country really shines. Because there's not only a good mixture of puzzle types, difficulty, and secrets to find, the game found ways to keep me thinking and yet not be frustrated at the same time. Now look, the more typical puzzles here aren't anything to write home about. We're not talking anything that you'd see in the Talos Principle here. You've seen puzzles like this before, basic math-type problems in which you have to figure out what sequence to get for a keypad, stuff like that. Or figuring out what the item you picked up could possibly be used for. Very reminiscent of old point-and-click puzzle games. But it does a good job of varying them over the course of the game and putting action here and there in between them. But then there's the next set of puzzles. Those that aren't directly obvious, where you have to think outside the box or listen to the lore that has been established to actually succeed. These are usually connected to more hidden elements of the game, like strong rare ammo or weapon upgrades. They made you connect things more beyond the puzzle itself to try to solve it. And that's when you truly get your aha moments of satisfaction. Sure, you could go look these up in a guide that gets written, but honestly, where's the fun in that? Seriously, do not play with a guide in this game, even for the secrets. Please. You will get so much more out of the game if you don't. But I also appreciated the game also did not fall into a rut in the same breath. The game does smart things to mess with you as the game progresses. Some of them may not make sense story-wise, but it was still appreciated. I'll use an analogy here to best describe this because I don't want to spoil what kind of things you can run across. So, you know those videos where people cut into ordinary things and they end up being cake? Yeah, think that. Only now you're questioning whether or not the shoe you're looking at is a cake or not. And the fact is, you're a little bit scared of whether to cut into it. Is it gonna hurt you? Why would it hurt you? That doesn't make sense. And yet, you think about it. That kind of thing. What good psych horror does to most players. I could talk all day about more of the gameplay and the atmosphere, but I do need to start wrapping this review up, so let me circle back to the story and the writing. This isn't anything too crazy when it comes to the horror genre. There's tropes here you'd expect for a game based on Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Mysterious characters, unknown origins, people not being who they are showing on the surface. All that is here and more. But I will say the world built here was interesting, especially the core idea that's causing the elements at the park. It's a little bit of a different take on sources of corruption you've seen in the space, and it actually makes you question whether or not it's truly a bad thing, or it's being corrupted in some other way. It poses questions and mysteries that you'd want, making the player think and imagine where this world could go. There's good lore, and items found to help push that forward, and specifically to justify the actions of Mr. Crow, who's the center of the story here. The side characters have good personalities and do add to the story, but I will admit I wish we had more interactions with them overall. Most of the time you get 1 to 3 interactions through the game, and that's about it. I know given the length of the game that I may have been asking for more from the side characters, but I do think that despite the focus, it could have really pushed Crow Country even further when it comes to being memorable. The writing itself is solid, and I do like Mara's description of things at times, giving her a little bit of sass mixed in with the seriousness needed in a situation like this. The game does have some moments of camp, but don't expect something like RE4 here or the type of performance you'd associate with the Resident Evil 1 voice acting, aka camp. This is focusing on the horror and the effects of the game, and does make you think what you do in these situations that Mara runs into. There's also one thing I will say before I start wrapping this up, that I want to say to the dev directly. That homage scene towards the end of the game, that came out of left field. I get what you were trying to reference, and I do appreciate it, but it sort of took me aback and almost took me completely out of the game at that point. I get it, I really do, but it was more funny more than anything. So, what is my overall verdict of Crow Country? Well, it's a fantastic experience that transported me back to my childhood. The wonder of exploring this world and seeing what came next entertained me from start to end, keeping up a variety of situations without feeling too strange or out of place. It tested my observation and puzzle-solving abilities, and yet also let me enjoy the atmosphere and haunted creations here, without getting me too frustrated with running around and trying to figure out what to do. Sure, the combat is alright, and could be better with tweaks in my opinion, but it complements a game that pays homage to Resident Evil and survival horror without being trapped in it. Is it perfect? No, not at all, and there will be players out there that will miss some of the more convenient elements of modern day versions of survival horror, but it also stands out thanks to its unique presentation and atmosphere. We haven't seen a lot of combinations like this, and honestly, because of that, it's a game that most everyone should play, coming in at a 91 out of 100, making it a must-buy, even if you're hurting for cash. But that does not take into account my enhancer system, which takes the more subjective element of games and tries to match a game to you. If you fall into one of the following categories on screen, add or subtract that score to the main score. If the first digit of your main score changes, refer to this chart to see if the game lies in the buyability rating for you. These subjective ones were a little harder in this case because I feel like the game had a very specific audience in mind thanks to its survival horror and presentation that was given in the trailers. But regardless, I do think that there are certain types of players that actually may want to avoid this game. There's not many of them, but some of them will have problems with the way the game was presented here. Others, on the other hand, will probably love this game till the end of time because, well, it's their equivalent to cocaine. Anyway, that's it for this review, and I thank you for making it this far, even if you jumped forward just to see the score. I get it, some people just want to see if the game is buyable enough and don't want to hear me talk about a game for 20 minutes. I get it, I do. But if you do like this type of content, hit that like button. And if you want to see more type of content like this, hit that subscribe button because I'm always doing reviews, or at least trying to. As to what the next review is going to be, it may be Parasite Eve. Have I beat the Chrysler Building? No, but I think I've got my determination on it. I've always wanted to do retro reviews, and I feel like this is the time to do it. I also do have a horror game that is coming up that was given with Crow Country at the same time. I may do that, and I may actually finish Moonlight Pulse and review that. I'm not sure, and I may get a review copy for something in the next couple of weeks and decide, oh, I'll put my energy into that. But that's it for now, and if you want to hear more about what's to come, go into the description and join the Discord, or see me go stream games on Twitch. Anyway, that's it for now, and as always, keep on gaming.